equals yes, do the following, or I could say if the answer is not equal to no. So the syntax for saying if the answer is not equal to no, I could have used the exclamation mark equal symbol, or I could have said if not answer equals no. This is a way of saying if the condition I'm providing is not happening, if this is not true, do this.
Right, okay.
So saying if the answer is yes, do the following, if the answer is not no, do the following, it's kind of saying the same thing.
Yep.
I could say if the total is less than 100, or if not, total greater than or equal to 100. Because if a total is not greater than or equal to 100, then it must be less than 100.
Yep.
So which is the right way to do it? Well, I don't know. It really falls into a certain amount of what do you like. I find it easier to express it in a positive way. I find saying if not total, if not answer kind of confusing. My brain just, especially, hey, when I'm getting tired and it's late in the night, I start looking at that and my brain has to think about it 6 times.
Exactly. Yeah, and especially if you've got, the word not, and then you've got not equals there, and now you're dealing with, double negatives and double secret probation, and, I just don't want to have to sit down and try to figure all of that out. So really, when it comes to writing those things out, keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah. But
what's the easiest way you can state it, and just go with that.
Yeah, so generally I will try to put things in the positive perspective rather than the nots if I have a choice. But the other way I think of it is, think of it how you would say it out loud.
Right.
If a course is completed, then send a certificate to the student. So you'd say, well, an if course completed is yes, send the certificate. If the order is under $50, add a shipping charge. Okay, then if total is under 50, add shipping. If a cat has not been vaccinated, call the owner. Now this one, you go, oh, see, now this one, it's if they have not been vaccinated, call them over. So in that case, I might actually use if not vaccinated, because it's actually the way I think of it. I only do the action if the cat is not vaccinated. So,
You could also use the not equal, so you could say if vaccinated, bang equal, or bang, exclamation point, bang, it's a Unix thing. In any event, you could also say the exclamation equals. And again, it does come down to a matter of personal preference.
Absolutely.
Which do you think is going to be the easiest to read?
And by the way, that is a great way that's another great geek tip. You want to learn how to speak geek with your geek friends, they'll say bang for exclamation mark.
Yeah.
It's just one of those terms that's used. And yes, it's a hangover from... hangover, that's a nice term. It's held over from the days of Unix. Maybe it is a hangover from Unix, let me tell you.
Completely
there was some stuff going, Unix was not a user-friendly place to be coding. Bring back the VI editor, no.
It makes sense.
And we did talk a little bit, this is just reinforcing that it is case sensitive when you do a comparison. So if you type uppercase and your if statement is looking for lowercase letters, then it's not going to be considered true. Uppercase YES is not equal to lowercase YES. So it becomes very important to use a function like lower or upper and do a conversion before you do the comparison. And you may want to actually convert both sides, especially if you've got a variable on the other side. You might want to do that convert to lowercase on both sides of your expression. Now, what if we want to do an if statement that uses numbers instead of strings? All the examples so far have been looking at strings, but absolutely there'll be times you want to do things like, hey, when you deposit money, if you deposit over $100, you get a free toaster. I remember these days.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you can't be 29 and remember the days of depositing something and getting a free toaster.
Hey, are you kidding? People still use toasters? What's wrong with that?
Well, yeah, but you don't go to a bank and get a free toaster anymore.
Where do I go get a free toaster?
We give them out here.
We give them out here.
All right. Okay.
Cool.
Free toasters.
Yeah, so we'll go collect a toaster. Excellent.
Awesome. So in this case, if you follow the sort of logic, if a user enters a deposit amount of 150, then that's more than 100. So you get a free toaster, and it'll say "Have a nice day." If they enter $50, well, $50 is not more than 100, so they will not see the message "You get a free toaster." They'll just see "Have a nice day." But here's the big one. What happens if they specify exactly $100? What do you think there?
So if they specify exactly 100, so it's got to be greater than, it wasn't greater than, so it's just going to be "Have a nice day."
Yeah.
You're not going to get a free toaster.
That's right.
There's no toaster love.
No toaster love. That's right. 100 is not greater than 100. It's equal to.
Right.
And this is one of those scenarios where it's really important when you're working with if statements and numeric values to test all those combinations. Test a greater value, a lesser value, and exactly equal to. And then if you're not sure, because you really have to ask, and sometimes you may have to go ask somebody, hey, if it's exactly $100, not $100.01, $100.01 is greater than 100. But if it's exactly 100, do they get the free toaster? Because those kind of mistakes can actually cause some pretty serious problems.
Yep.
Because you're actually changing their business rules if you don't do it correctly. So I think we can do a quick example of using some numeric values. So this is if statements with strings. And I'm going to use your wonderful trick you showed us earlier, Christopher. I'm going to use that Control-K-C command.
Control-K, Control-C.
Well, you just hold down the Control key. You
Well,
go
yeah.
Control-K-C. I just hold Control, go and Control-K-C.
Yeah, I always just say it with the second control, because a lot of times people will let up off the control.
Yeah, you have to hold the Control key down the whole time.
Exactly.
Very true.
Yep. Yeah.
But I love that little keyboard shortcut. There's a way of adding that to your toolbar as well, but I can't remember how to do that.
Yep.
So let's add an if statement here. If with numbers, and we're just going to say if, let's see, let's do a deposit equals an input of how much do you want to deposit. There we go. I'm going to add another space there so it looks a little bit nicer on the screen. And then I'm going to say if deposit is greater than 100, then we are going to print enjoy your toaster. Woohoo! All right.
Toast.
Yes, exactly. And otherwise, we're always going to say print have a nice day, because regardless of how much money they deposit, we're going to always wish them to have a happy day. All right, now the first thing is when I run this code, I'm going to run into a little bit of a crash. I am expecting this one. Deposit, I want to deposit $150.
See, we'll always admit when we had something go sideways that we weren't expecting.
Yeah.
This one we were expecting.
This one we are expecting. And I love, I do love the fact that like gives me even a line saying, this line here blew up on you, Susan. It says, okay, you have an error. What is that error? Well, that error is unorderable type string greater int. So we're back to the usual problem again, that we have a string value and it's trying to see if a string is greater than an integer value. So we can't compare a string and an integer. This is like when we're trying to add strings and integers or compare them one equal to another. So it's my data type problem coming back to haunt me again. Because if we go back and look at our code, you can see that we used the input function to ask somebody to enter a value, and input functions return a string. And then we're trying to compare a string to the value 100, so it's giving me an error.
So there we are back at data type conversions here.
Right, so we have to think back 2 modules now. And it's funny how we were like, man, 5 modules in, I got to go back 2 modules. This is getting hard on the brain. But there was that float function, and I'm going to get fancy here. I'm actually going to do it. This was actually suggested by somebody in the Q&A.
Yeah, a lot of people
saying, why don't you just convert it to a float right away when you get it back?
And the answer really is, it just depends on your level of comfort. That I know a lot of people that will look at that, especially people that are new to programming, and seeing the 2 things happen at the same time will kind of cause them to be thrown for a loop.
Yeah.
So they like that separate breakdown of just take the user input first, convert it second. Okay, now let's go ahead and use it. But can you go ahead, just like Susan had on her code here, and combine them both? Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's just said, you guys have some choices there in terms of how you write your code.
Yep.
Somebody had asked about in the Q&A, so I just wanted to show you, absolutely, if you want, you can take the value returned by the input and immediately convert it to an integer or a float before you put it in your variable, so right away it's treated like a numeric variable. So if we go back to the code, you can see I have basically said take the results of the input statement and convert it to a float, which meant I did need to remember 2 closing brackets at the end. 1 to close the input command and 1 to close the float.
Paren.
So now when I run, and this time when I type in $150, oh, now it's blown up for a different reason. Unorderable types. It's still giving me a string. Did I get something?
You want it to be an integer, I believe.
Integer?
Just 100.
Oh, yes. It's an int, not a float. Thank you.
Yep. Data types.
Yes, it's all getting the right data types. 150. There we go.
There we
Enjoy
go.
my toaster. Yay!
Yay,
I get to have a
yay
nice
toasters.
day. I get my toaster. This is all good. So again, now, but of course, remember, I just want to prove that if I type in exactly 100, I don't get a toaster.
Have a nice day.
100 is not greater than 100.
Yep.
which hopefully is the way the bank wanted me to implement it. I'd better go double check if I'm not sure. That is so important. When in doubt, ask your users. Find out the real business rules. So, yeah.
I was just going to say, now we've actually got enough skills that we could, take the rounded pennies off and start funneling them off to a separate account somewhere.
So it seems to me somebody did that many years ago and made rather a scary amount of money and got in a lot of trouble later.
There should be a movie around that as well.
Yeah.
In any event, okay, carrying on.
Going back,
Yes.
so just always remember when you're testing, if we look at the slide, we always want to make sure when we're using greater than and less than in our if statements, when you're testing, always test a value greater than, a value less than, and what we call a boundary condition, the exact value you're comparing to. Always test all three situations. Now, one of the things we did just talk about was the issue of when we're asking people to enter a value, right? We use an input statement. You can run into data type conversion errors just like we did now. And so you may need to actually convert that to an integer, because you can see below that if I actually take a look here, you can see in the error message that the actual error message that's being returned is it's got an integer on one side, a string on the other. So we need to convert that we need to convert the string into an integer so we have the same data type on both sides. So we fix that. And you know what? My apologies, there's a typo on this slide. That should be if int deposit, not if float deposit, because we just saw that in the demo, but when I convert it to a float, it doesn't work. Now here, you'll notice I actually converted the data type when I did the comparison. So it's funny, every time I write the code, I approach it a different way. I don't always think about it. So lots of different ways that you can, there's different times in your code when you can do the conversion. It's really up to you. Do you want to do it right away? Do you do it when you need it? The only thing I would say is if you're going to find yourself converting it 8 or 10 different times, do it once, put it in a different variable that'll store the float version of it, or do it right away. Yeah. Because I'm lazy. I don't want to have to convert more often than I have to.
I'm noticing that theme today.
Yeah, I'm lazy with my code.
Yeah.
And here's the example actually where I've done the conversion when I actually use the input statement. So I do have that example in the slides as well. Though again, I'd like to make a point. I did make a typing mistake here. That should be int input, not float. So replace float with int, please. I will try and fix that in the slides up on the GitHub when we have a break. All right. So the other thing that you do run into is, what if they don't get a free toaster? You might say, well, you get a free coffee mug no matter what, but if you deposit over $100, you get a free toaster. So we run into these situations where you get one or the other. So if you get this, if you deposit over $100, you get a toaster. Otherwise, you get a coffee mug. And in coding terms, that's else. So there is a special syntax we use. You use the keyword else, and you have to remember that colon after it. And this code will only be executed if the condition is not true. So in this case situation, if they have over $100, it will execute and give them a free toaster. If it is not over $100, if that statement is not true, then it jumps down and runs the code in the else statement. And it's important that the code inside the else statement is also indented so it knows what is the code to execute when the condition is not true. So now I have a one or the other type situation. It will either give me a free toaster or give me a free mug, but I'm getting something either way, no matter what I deposit now. So the else statement is only executed if the condition is not true. If we enter $50 in this scenario, Christopher, what's going to appear on the screen if I put in a deposit of $50?
Enjoy your mug. Have a nice day.
All right. What if I enter $150?
You get a free toaster. Have a nice day.
And if I specify exactly $100?
Enjoy your mug. Have a nice day.
That's right, because $100 is not greater than. We always want to test that boundary condition. Another neat trick, and I'll do a demo of this one in a second, is the idea of Boolean variables. So there wasn't one variable type we didn't talk about earlier, and that is Booleans. So a Boolean variable allows you to actually remember the result of a condition. So in this case, I've got code that goes off and asks the person how much they want to deposit. And if they deposit more than $100, then I actually create, and we often call these variables flags. It's just a naming convention we often use for Boolean variables that store a true or false, because they're often flags to us. Has something happened or not happened? So we'll often use this term and call these Boolean variables flags. So I'm creating a flag here, but in the end, it's just a variable, and the variable stores a value of true or false. And I'm saying if they deposit over $100, free toaster is true because, yeah, they can get a free toaster. And then later in my code, maybe I have a whole bunch of other complicated logic that actually updates fair balances and so on in the actual system. And then later I say, oh, by the way, I got to remember, by the way, if free toaster is true, but you don't have to say if free toaster equal true.
Right.
You can just say if free toaster, then do the following.
And then the advantage here is your code is more readable. So if you put in that $100 value or something like that, the problem is, number one, if you're using that in multiple locations, you have to go in and kind of keep stressing that. But also number two is that you've now given a little bit of meaning. So kind of going back to our comment, and that can oftentimes be used to try and disguise bad code. Now, if we go in and we say free toaster, well, when I go in and I look at this, I know exactly what we're testing. I'm testing, do they get a free toaster? Rather than having to interpret, okay, well, what was the amount supposed to be? You know, and that way I could put that somewhere else, put that, say, in a function. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Put that up earlier in the code. And then in the long run, my code can be more readable and also more maintainable, because that way, if I'm doing that test multiple times, the rules change. I only have to update one spot of code.
And that's it. Yep. All about being lazy. You know, it's funny, writing the code, when you start getting further into coding, one of the things you'll discover is one of the constants of life is change.
Yep.
And whatever the business rules are now will change.
Yep.
Right now, it's $100 gets you a free toaster. Oh, guess what? Inflation, you now have to deposit over $1,000 to get a free toaster. So if I had 3 or 4 different parts of my code, maybe there was a part of my code that says, if they deposit over $100, send an email to the person to order the free toaster. And if they, later on, you have, oh, by the way, if they deposit over $100, we need to prompt them for the shipping information so we can send them the free toaster. And we also have to make sure that somewhere in the code we have this logic that says, if they deposit over $1,000, then, you know, enough to get the free toaster, then we have to remember to send them an email saying, hey, congratulations, you're getting a free toaster.
Right.
So, like 3 different things we have to do, and maybe our code is kind of chunky, so it's all not nicely tidy and put together. And then, yeah, down the road, they change their mind about the amount. And what happens, and this has happened to so many coders, you remember it updated in 2 of the 3 places. And then suddenly somebody's going, how come we ordered this person a free toaster, but we never asked them for their shipping address? And you're like, but that was working before. And then you realize, oh, I set that rule and I was checking it and I forgot to update the threshold amount of what we get them a free toaster in this place, but I updated it the other 2 places.
Yep.
By using a flag, we check the condition once, set a flag, and then we just use that flag anywhere else we need to check. Did that happen? Do they get the free toaster? If so, ask them for the shipping information. Did they get the free toaster? Order of a toaster. Did they get the free toaster? Send them an email and say congratulations. So yeah, it reduces the chances of you making mistakes later.
Yep.
And those are nasty mistakes to catch, because your code works, and it might be a month before somebody clues in that one little, that you only fixed 2 of 3 places.
Yep.
So coding once is not only lazy coding, it can also be safer coding.
You know, I will always remember I was talking with somebody who had gone in, and this is a long time ago, but he had set up, I was at a training center, he'd set up all of our different routers for all of our different classrooms, so that it really was that you could just walk in, unplug one of these things, drop it into any other classroom, plug it back in, and make one change, just like go in and update the name of the computer, give it a reboot, and poof, it automatically started working. And I just looked at the amount of work that he had to do to make all of this happen, and I looked at him and said, why in the world did you go through all of this effort? And he said, because I was too lazy to not do it right the first time. So, you know, when we talk about lazy, we're not really just talking about...
We're not being disparaging.
Exactly. We're not being disparaging. We're not talking about just throwing slop together. That we are talking about, you know, if you make a good code up front, in the long run, that's going to make your life that much easier.
It's actually efficiency.
Exactly, yeah. Be lazy. Be lazy. Because when you're thinking about, well, if I have to go back and update this later on, which you will, the only constant in software development is change. If you only have to update one spot, that's going to make your life easier. And that's also going to, in turn, feed your laziness. So keep that in mind as you're going through and writing your code. What's going to be the easiest to maintain? That's the lazy code.
Yes, it's
Yep.
said. So we use the word lazy. We're kind of joking. What we really mean is it's efficiency. Efficiency
Yeah.
in our effort, both in creating the code and in maintaining the code later. Because I don't know if you realize that probably when you get into coding jobs, probably 20% of the coding you do is creating new code, and maybe 80% of the code you do is maintaining and updating existing code.
And if
That's
not,
the
maybe
real
a
world.
90-10.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
so-
Somebody just mentioned right here, lazy perfectionism. That's a phrase that I really like. So yeah,
We adopt
Scott,
that.
I'm stealing that one. Thank you, Scott.
Lazy
Lazy perfectionism.
I love it.
I like it.
All right. So these things like a Boolean variable are really useful for that sort
Yeah.
of situation.
Yep.
But of course, if you're using a Boolean variable, whenever you're testing if statements, make sure you test what happens if it's true, what happens if it's false. Always test both conditions, because you may find the code works once and not the other way. In fact, I'm actually going to do that exact example. Where I'm going to say, if a deposit's greater than 100, then I'm going to set a flag called free toaster
Do you have a
equals to
flag?
true. So I'm creating, that reference I got, but it was pretty obscure. So I don't know how many people know enough Eddie Izzard to get that reference. So if a deposit's over 100, I'm going to set free toaster as true. And then I'm going to imagine I have a whole bunch of complex code here. And then later in my code, whoops, don't need a double, I say if free toaster, then print enjoy your toaster. All right, so if we take a look at our code now, so just scroll down a little bit. So we ask them to enter how much they want to deposit. If they deposit over 100, we set our flag free toaster to true. By the way, this
Yep.
is case sensitive. Lowercase t for true is not right. Uppercase is correct. The color coding can help. If you don't see the blue, that means it's not recognizing it as a keyword. And then we say if free toaster, and you can imply here is equal to true, but you don't have to say. You can put it there if it helps you. You can say equal true. If that helps you to
Lowercase.
remember.
Or-
No, uppercase.
Oh, sorry. You're
Yeah.
right. Sorry.
No problem.
My brain just immediately went to C#
Yeah,
there.
no.
So, yeah.
I
sorry
know.
about that.
I always get that one in Python. So if you prefer, if it makes more sense to you to type if free toaster equal true, by all means do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's unnecessary though. Then enjoy your toaster. So now I've got this code. I execute, and I say I want to deposit $500. I always test greater value. It says enjoy your toaster. Have a nice day. And then I'm going to be a good tester. I'm also going to test a smaller value, and then I'm going to test the boundary value, $50.
While you're doing that, this is perfect because somebody just asked in the window, would it not be a good idea to default free toaster to false above the if? It was like, we
Like
knew
you knew.
Yeah.
Excellent question, because look what happens when I specify $50. Boom, it crashes. Because what happens here, if you take a look, it says free toaster is not defined. It can't find the variable free toaster.
Yep.
You go, wait a second, I declared it there, but then when you stop and think about it, you realize I only create the variable free toaster if they deposited over $100. So it doesn't have a value, it doesn't exist. So when you just say, hey, look at the value of free toaster, it goes, what value? What free toaster? I've never seen it. So this is where good habits, it's a good habit to declare your variables and give them an initial value at the top of your code.
Yep.
So I'm going to say, assume by default that free toaster is false. And then if they happen to deposit over $100, then change that to true.
Yep.
And that's going to get rid of that nasty error message.
Don't forget to hit
getting-
stop.
Oh, yeah, thank you. My code is still running, so I need to stop
There we
it
go.
and run again. And now if I specify $50, it says, oh, that's nice. Have
Yep.
a nice day. Just to be thorough, though, I'm going to be a good tester. I'm going to test my boundary condition. $100 should not give me a free toaster. Excellent. I have coded my lines correctly.
Well done.
So initializing variables, especially Boolean variables, very good habit, because otherwise, and that's why it's also very important to test true and false, greater than, less than, equal to. Test every possible path, because you might have gone and said, hey, it's working.
Yep.
And then one day somebody deposits less than $100 and the code crashes.
Yep.
Yeah, so we want to make sure we do lots of good testing. All right, we've just done that. And we just walked through this exact scenario of why did it crash? Because the variable was only declared if the values were greater than 100. So we had to initialize the variable. So this is just the same code. I'm going through it quickly because we just saw it in the demo.
Yep.
Are we just making the code more complicated by using the Boolean? Again, we just had that whole discussion. You know, there might be more than one place you have to check the conditions, so we're trying to be effective and efficient. If it's very complicated, it can make the code easier to follow if you just write the logic for checking it in one place, and then you just check the result later on when you need to. And we often call that a flag. So we had that whole discussion just a couple of minutes ago. But now we have more ways to make some typing mistakes. So Christopher, I'm going to challenge you. See if you can find 3 typing mistakes here.
Deposit equals if float deposit. It should be int, but
yes, it should be int deposit. Yeah, okay, bonus. There might be 4 mistakes because we were just seeing that
actually,
should be int.
You know, one of the things, and somebody pointed this out in the chat window. For whatever it's worth, you actually didn't make a mistake. Float does work.
Okay.
The reason that it failed was because you still had the code running.
Oh.
See, so you didn't make a mistake after all.
There you go.
Yep, so you can take that off your quota for the day.
Well, that's good because now I don't feel so bad because I was thinking, did I make the mistake on all the slides?
Nope.
I was like, okay, I feel better now. So
exactly.
I had something else wrong with the code. Okay.
Yep. So anyway, so to bring the slide back up, so free toaster.
So I'm going to remove that because that's okay.
Yep.
Yep.
True should be uppercase T.
Correct. Excellent catch. That's a sneaky one. You know, that's a, oops. Oh, I cheated and gave you a hint. Hey, hang on. I got to take those away. I gave you a hint. All right, hang on. Yes, that should be uppercase T. Absolutely.
The second problem is you need a colon after 100.
I forgot my colon here. That is correct. After the if statement.
Third problem is free toaster needed to be tabbed in.
Yes, this needs to be indented. That is correct, and that's you got it.
All right, go me.
So there we go. So those are the mistakes we had. We forgot the colon in the if statement. We forgot to indent the line about setting the free toaster flag to true, and we forgot true. We accidentally entered uppercase. So your challenge, now that you've seen all this, you're going to try and calculate the shipping charges for somebody making a purchase. You're going to ask the user to enter the amount for their total purchase. If it's under $50, add $10. Otherwise, shipping is free. Tell the user their final total, including shipping costs. And here's an extra little credit challenge because we haven't covered it. So this is going to require going off and doing a little Bing search to figure it out. Format the number so it looks like a monetary value. Add that dollar symbol to the output.
There you go.
I'm not going to challenge those of you working in other locales to start including euro symbols and so on. Just doing the dollar value will be a little challenge for you. Let's not get into localization just yet. And don't forget to test your solution when you're done with the value 50, less than 50, and exactly 50.
There it is.
So congratulations, you can now write code that reacts to different conditions and solve problems that require decision making.
Cool. Well, yeah, I think there's still one more module left to cover today that we want to go in and kind of take a look at a bit more complex if statement, things like ands and ors and all that good stuff. So what do you say we take 10 minutes? I could use a bit more water, and then we'll come on back and we'll close today off. Now remember, we still have tomorrow, so still an entire day tomorrow.
We're going to draw stuff tomorrow.
Yeah, we've got a lot of cool stuff tomorrow. But for right now, let's go ahead and take 10. We'll see you guys back here to finish off the last module of today. So 10 minutes, we'll be back here. All right, well, welcome back. We obviously had a good time over the break. For those of you that are just joining us, or maybe have forgotten, it's been a bit of a long day. This is Introduction to Programming Using Python. That is Susan Ibach. I am Christopher Harrison. That is Hockey Geek Girl. I am Geek Trainer, and we finished off our last module introducing if statements. And now what we want to do is take our if statements up to the next level, because you know, when you're creating your logic, it's not simply going to be, if this is true, do this, otherwise do something else. It's never just that simple. That there's always more things involved. That maybe 2 things need to be true. Or maybe if this was false, then maybe we want to check something else. And if that was true, then we're going to do something different. And
basically, life's just more complicated than that. So we're going to need a little more capacity to handle a little more complex situations.
Yeah, it's more than just black and white. You know, there's a lot of gray here, you know? And that's what we want to take a look at. So, you know, there's a lot of different conditions that that can affect the outcome. So if you're in England and you say hello, you say hello. If you're in Germany, you say Guten Tag. If you're in France, you say Bonjour. To everybody who's a native speaker of that language, I apologize for my complete lack of an accent. I just say everything in an American accent. So for that, I do apologize. If you win the lottery and the prize is over $1 million, then you can retire to a life of luxury. It'd be kind of nice to retire to a life of luxury.
I'm all for that, yeah.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And then finally, last but not least, if it's Monday, check to see if there's fresh coffee. Actually, if it's a day ending in Y for me, go check to see if there's fresh coffee. I always need coffee. But in any event, go in, check to see if there's coffee. If not, then we'll go to the nearest cafe.